So we've been treating obesity backwards. If you walked into a doctor's office with a fever and all they did was prescribe Tylenol without asking why, would you call that good medicine? Of course not. But that's exactly how we treat obesity. We focus on symptoms, things like weight and blood pressure and blood sugar, but we ignore the drivers behind them all, and that's insulin resistance. Today, I want to show you how the medical system has been managing obesity backwards and what it would actually look like to go ahead and reverse it. So let's walk through what actually happens in most doctors' offices. A patient shows up overweight. Maybe they have high blood pressure, creeping A1C, and elevated triglycerides. So what do? We put them on blood pressure meds and statins, and we give them metformin or insulin. We give them a nutrition handout that says, eat more fiber, cut back on fat. You got to eat a low fat diet. In other words, we manage each and every downstream issue separately, but never ask what's upstream. But here's the thing, all of those issues are metabolic, and nearly all stem from chronically elevated insulin levels, which we don't test for, don't track, and we don't teach. We keep mopping the floor while the sink is still overflowing. This isn't healthcare, it's disease management. And welcome back to the Obesity Project. My name is Dr. Mark Schenkman. I'm an oral and maxillofacial surgeon who has dedicated myself to correcting some of the mistakes out in the medical field, as well as guiding people through nutrition and good health. Today, episode 53, we're treating obesity backwards. So we need to understand insulin resistance, which is the real root. And as an oral surgeon, I know roots. So let's go deeper. What is insulin resistance? Well, it's when your cells become numb to the signal of insulin. And insulin is the hormone that tells your body to store nutrients, especially glucose. But this doesn't happen overnight. At first, the body makes more insulin to compensate. So those cells are not listening. So your body responds by making more and more insulin to kind of wake the cells up and say, hey, look, you need to let this blood sugar in. And that does keep your blood sugar normal for a while. But underneath the surface, that excess insulin is causing several important system overrides or things that are actually going wrong with our system. So that increases fat storage. A big one is it increases inflammation, which does a ton of things downstream. It creates hunger dysregulation, and you're hungry all the time. And I speak from experience. When I was on that sugar roller coaster, I was hungry all day long. And even with intermittent fasting, I talked to people that were like, I've been doing fasting for 10, 12, 15 years, and I'm never hungry for breakfast. And yet I was hungry all the time. I had been doing fasting for like 3 years, and I was still hungry. So this is what actually occurs. You get hunger dysregulation. You also get liver fat, and I had fatty liver and have done some things since to actually reverse that. And then eventually, the last thing that you actually see is high blood sugar. So when you're so when does your fasting glucose finally go up? It's not at the beginning of disease. It's the last phase. It's the last thing to be seen. And that's why focusing on glucose and blood glucose is absolutely, that's when things are too late. We should be catching and we should be treating the insulin problem long before that actually happens. So you get things like weight gain and brain fog and fatigue and PCOS and erectile dysfunction and hypertension. And these are all early signs of metabolic dysfunction. But do most doctors connect the dots? Unfortunately, the answer is no. Now, why is that? Because they've been taught, we've been taught to treat symptoms, not systems. So you may be wondering, if this is so obvious, and it seems like it is, why aren't more doctors doing it? Well, there's three big reasons why this happens. First is medical training. We learn to diagnose disease and prescribe medications. Even as a dentist, as an oral surgeon, a dental specialty, we get trained to diagnose a disease like gum disease or caries, which is decay, and prescribe treatment, or in this case, medications, if you're talking about physicians. So we diagnose diseases and prescribe medications or treatments. And we don't get in-depth training on nutrition, insulin dynamics, or lifestyle-based reversal. I've talked to my medical colleagues, and they've gotten like one 3-hour course in the entire 4 years of medical school on nutrition. And I'm not even sure I got that much in dental school in 4 years of dental school. So first is a lack of proper medical training. Secondly, we see pharmaceutical influence. And here's the bottom line. There's absolutely no money in reversing disease through food, but there is a ton of money in managing it forever. And the system isn't broken. It's not broken. It's working exactly as it was built. The pharmaceutical influence is tremendous. Medical organizations like the American Heart Association and others are heavily influenced by pharmaceutical industry. And they're the ones very often funding the research to show that their drugs are effective. But there's no money in proving that food-based treatment or nutrition will reverse type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, and all of the downstream chronic illnesses, because there's no money in it. There's no one gaining from that. You would think that the medical profession would be much more interested in helping people get better than whether there was money there. But the bottom line is medical practices, like dental practices, like my oral surgery practice, are businesses after all, and they're in the business of making money. So first we have medical training. Secondly, we have pharmaceutical industry influence in the pharmaceutical industry. And now we have food industry pressure. So ultra processed foods drive insulin resistance. But those are the same companies, like the pharmaceuticals, that are sponsoring medical associations and fund research. So is there a conflict of interest? Of course there is, absolutely. But it's 100% normalized. And worse yet, if you're a researcher that proves that ultra processed refined carbohydrates are actually behind all of this, you get ostracized, your research never comes to light, and you'll never get another funded research study again. So the problem is the financial incentive behind these research studies. So the result is we treat obesity like it's your fault, instead of acknowledging that it's a biologic response to a completely toxic food environment. All right, so what does real care look like? Real care looks like this. We test for insulin, not just glucose. We educate people on metabolic function. We train them, we teach them, which is what I'm trying to do in these videos. We use food as information, not just fuel. The food has to tell our bodies that we need to use this energy right now as a source of energy, get our bodies to function and do the things that require energy, but not to store it for later use. So we need to use the food as information, and we need to influence insulin to be able to give the proper information. And we need to personalize plans based on biology, not just calories. And it all starts with food. It all starts with what you put in your mouth and what you swallow. It starts with prioritizing protein. It starts with not fearing fat. And oftentimes those two things go hand in hand. We need to eliminate the ultra-processed foods. And we need to eat carbs when we eat carbs, as whole foods, not as powders, not as syrups, not as processed items. We need to also space out our meals. We need to give our insulin a chance to drop. And this isn't about dieting, it's about removing the interference. It's about letting the body heal by lowering insulin and regaining our metabolic flexibility. And what do I mean by metabolic flexibility? Our bodies are hybrid engines. We are sugar burners and we are fat burners. Let me get in the picture so you can see both, right? Sugar and fat. And when we're eating, especially if we eat high carbohydrate diet, we're in sugar burning mode all the time. But the reality is we should be in fat burning mode at least half of the time, if not longer. And so we can use sugar as a source of fuel, or we can use fat as a source of fuel, which depends on insulin and what the insulin levels are that tell our body what to do with that food that we've just eaten. So you have to understand the body doesn't want to be sick. It just is waiting for the right instructions what to do with the food that we just ate. So obesity isn't caused by laziness. The guy in the picture here, not a lazy guy. It's not caused by lack of willpower, as I talked about in yesterday's video. It's caused by biology, by following bad inputs and bad recommendations that were handed down to us many, many years ago, back in the late 70s, early 80s. It's caused by biology that gave us those bad inputs that were based on unsound science. And the solution isn't in the pharmacy. It's in the kitchen. It's in education. It's in understanding how our bodies work and changing what you feed it. So in the next episode of the Obesity Project, we'll be tackling another dangerous myth that fat is bad for you. We'll unpack how dietary fat was demonized, what the science actually says, and how this mistake has fueled the metabolic crisis we're in today. Until then, don't chase the symptoms, treat the system, and reclaim your health. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure to like, share, and comment. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you can get more great content coming out from me where we're busting myths wide open about disease, about insulin resistance, about our nutrition, our pharmaceutical industry, our food industry that is running the show. Stay tuned for more great information. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.